Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, January the 17th, 2025, and today we're going to do the Feedback Friday thing. We'll answer a question or your questions about soil blocks, and we'll also get a question about this hand-drawn compost spreader that I trialed to see if it would help spread compost and amendments on to market gardens. So let's do it. All right, well, welcome to Friday, everyone. We are over halfway into January, so that's a fact, I guess. It's Friday, which means we are kicking off the show, as we always do, by looking back at your all's thoughts on the week's topics, starting on Monday when we discuss the importance of valuing every seed and how your winter self needs to take care of your summer self. But I liked this comment from @DougLibby4776, who writes, quote, "Really enjoyed the podcast, Jesse. So much great information. I'm a 45-year-old guy investigating the idea of a vegetable farm, and I'm learning the ropes. I enjoy your sped up footage. They add a good visual to the videos, but also give some insight to the work involved in harvesting. I had an idea. Your sped up videos are cool. How about some slow-mo videos of your harvesting methods? I'm thinking there are techniques that you have mastered over the years that minimize damage to the crop, leave roots in the dirt, and disturb the dirt the least. Plus, everyone likes a good slow-mo. Thanks for all your efforts." End quote. A great question, and thanks for the note there. So for those of you who are strictly podcast listeners and not watchers, I try to add some B-roll to the video format because I don't know if you've ever just had to stare at me talking at a camera for 20 minutes, but it's not the most exciting thing. I have to do it every day, and it's painfully boring. And so with the slow-mo thing, I think this is a great idea. Honestly, the reason I don't do more slow-mo is just annoying old efficiency. If I set the camera down and hit time lapse, then I can work for 45 minutes or whatever straight without stopping. Plus, it does not really create a gigantic file to deal with later. But slow-mo requires not only more stopping and starting, but also double the frames per second, meaning the file sizes become absolutely bananas. So that's clear. For slow-mo, you film something with double the number of frames per second, and then you slow it down by half. So it doesn't look choppy, but more frames means more data, thus bigger files. Also, I don't have a really great computer for editing that can handle too many bonkers-sized files, but I will have to upgrade when we get a producer so that it can actually be efficient. A producer who could also potentially help play videographer sometimes and make the videos more visually interesting without making me have to stop and start 100 times. So hopefully more of that kind of stuff in the future. I really want to make this podcast something fun to not just listen to, but to look at. That's the idea. And I don't always know what others don't know, so yeah, slow-mo could be helpful. On Tuesday, I had a lot of fun with that show. We discussed soil blocking, and I'll save all my soil block answers for the last segment, but also our relationship to fire. Way too many great comments in this one to really catalog here, but I thought this one was interesting from @PeterHain782 about fired and controlled burns. Quote, "I'm working my way through the Soil Food Web webinars. In a 2019 webinar, Dr. Elaine Ingham and Dr. Brian Cobb discussing wildfire soil remediation pointed out following about California. The soil biology in the Northern Californian forests, as tested in 2019 compared to earlier tests by Dr. Ingham, had comparatively little or no fungi in the soil, resulting in stressed trees that would burn more easily. According to her, healthy forest soils, biomass 90% fungal, means healthy vegetation that is more resistant to fires. The soils have been disturbed by various human activities, i.e., allowing recreational visitors and their vehicles into the forests, compacting the soils. Dr. Cobb said that firs have been allowed to grow in the Californian forests due to bad forest management. 6 years later, their worst fears have been terribly realized. If we don't respect and look after our environments, especially the natural environment, we are literally playing with fire," end quote. So I started watching that webinar last night while I was doing my exercise. I love to watch stuff like that on the exercise bike, which is totally normal. And although I didn't quite yet make it to the fire stuff, I liked that presenter a lot. Not a lot of people can do good science communication like that, so props to them. Anyway, it did send me down a rabbit hole reading about how fungal populations change after forest fires compared to no fires, compared to control burns, and it seems like that can be a whole segment on its own for a later date because it is really fascinating stuff. Like you may lose some saprotrophic fungi That's the ones that like eat forest litter. And thus that means maybe the litter decomposed more slowly, but the soil potentially gains some fungal richness and diversity. Anyway, I haven't looked at that much into it, but it's very interesting. More on that stuff later because the soil dynamics are really fascinating. But thanks for pointing out that video. I'm planning to finish it up probably today when I get back on the bike. One note that YouTube will flag sometimes when you post like a comment with a link. So if you want to put a recommendation in the comments, that's awesome. I would skip the link. I would just say what the title is so YouTube doesn't disappear it. Anyway, then Wednesday I discussed dropping organic certification and dropping our farmers market. Lots of good discussion from those topics in the comment sections. I appreciated this criticism from @AnthonySNY, who wrote, quote, "Disappointed. Organic needs a real voice and acting like money isn't a motivation is just an insult to human intelligence," end quote. Thanks. And again, I want people to know that it's okay to offer criticisms, but of course I may address it here, so I'm not trying to pick on you. Just fair warning. To the money part, there is a difference between being motivated by money and having to do things to earn money because that's the way society is designed. For instance, I've worked jobs I don't want to work just to pay the bills. I do stuff now that isn't my favorite because it keeps the roof over my family's head. But I also do things that are significantly lower paying because I'm motivated to, for instance, share information for free to make a difference in the world rather than hide it behind a paywall, for instance. I wrote a book instead of doing an online course because it's cheaper for people to access. Online courses are way more profitable. I could truly make like 6 figures a year just traveling around doing speaking gigs. And I greatly limit my travel because I'm not motivated by money. I'm motivated by being with my young kids and by helping people and by ecology and food and by coaching soccer for my community. But I will say there are great ecological farmers for whom they get a thrill seeing their weekly revenue numbers increase. I honestly sometimes wish I was one of them. It would make everything, frankly, a lot easier for me. So I get what you're saying with this comment, but it's not an insult to human intelligence. In terms of human intelligence, money is a really new entity at no more than 5 or 10,000 years old, while Homo sapiens are roughly 2 to 300,000 years old. So considering that a substantially larger percentage of history, 95% or more, we bartered and traded commodities and services instead of using money, it should be acceptable for people to have other motivations than money. It was not that long ago that most of us did not use money at all. In fact, if you've ever lived in the countryside, you know that money isn't the only form of currency here. My neighbor cleared our driveway the other day, for example, and we've helped them by watching their dogs and dealing with fallen trees, etc. It's all unspoken, but it's the best currency, I know. More on that another time. Actually, I may save that one for Monday. That's a good topic. As for the part of the criticism about organic needing a real voice, no one is stopping organic from having a real voice but themselves. When it comes to things like hydroponics being allowed, if people don't say, yeah, this is not for me any longer, the boundaries are just going to keep being pushed further and further. I mean, it's a bit surprising to me how many people just found out in the video that organics was allowing hydroponics. Like they weren't aware of that. Maybe a quote unquote real voice is someone informing people of what organics is becoming to keep the pressure on the organic certification process to rectify their mess. Also, @SlightLine4004 asked if I was aware of the Real Organic project, and absolutely we are. We were Real Organic certified. I love what they're doing. They should take over the entire organic certification process, in my opinion, but it's just, right now, it's just an add-on label, meaning you have to certify to be Real Organic certified. So if you are certified organic, please do certify Real Organic. It's totally worth it. If you are a shopper, choose Real Organic over to USDA Organic. If we ever recertify, we will absolutely be Real Organic certified. And you should be too. But I'm not going to make USDA Organic look good so they can keep stretching the label. At some point, I think a real voice is one that says, this doesn't really represent me anymore. And until they get rid of the hydroponics thing, I'm not going to represent it. Sorry. I will take back my 2 days of work I calculate that we ultimately spend per year dealing with the certification and put it into something that we do want to represent. So yeah, I mean, I appreciate the criticism. Please keep them coming. Yesterday was the Onion Focus episode, and there were a lot of great questions and comments, but this one felt to me like something people may run into, not just with onions, but other crops as well, which came from @Leslie Vasquez. I almost said 13.6. I think you read it as 136. Anyway, they wrote, quote, if you don't have a greenhouse, would you start the seeds and wait until March to take them out, or try to take them outdoors as soon as they germinate? Thanks, end quote. Okay, so great question. If you have no easy way to propagate early seedlings, then your options are basically to either buy starts, which I think is a totally fine option, or set something up with grow lights in a closet or some free space. You could also build a cold frame outside, which Hannah and I used one for our first couple seasons growing on our own, and it worked fine, albeit with a lot of bending over, but it worked fine. There are lots of nurseries and such out in the world that you can communicate with, and maybe they can do some of your growing for you. Although the price tag can be daunting, it's worth at least checking in and seeing what it would cost for something at least like onions. Don't want to do is go through all the trouble of getting them started only for them to die or bolt. So if you do take them outside, you want to make sure that they're protected. Anyway, thank you all so much for the comments and discussions this week. I wish I had more time to engage with all of them, but you appreciate all of you. I, once again, have the smartest comment section on YouTube. All right, it's break time, so let's take a quick break and then BRB. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Peaceful Heritage Nursery. If you're looking for hardy and resilient fruit trees, berry plants, or pawpaw trees, then check out Peaceful Heritage Nursery. Peaceful Heritage Nursery LLC is a mail-order nursery shipping premium quality fruit trees and berry plants across the USA. They specialize in resilient, non-GMO plant genetics for small growers. Their diverse selection includes berries, cold hardy figs, passion fruit, gumi, mulberry, and much more. They're famous for their diverse selection of premium quality grafted pawpaw trees. 5-star Google ratings and customer testimonials attest to their commitment to excellence in quality and service. Find them at peacefulheritage.com and join their mailing list. Once again, find them at peacefulheritage.com. Use the promo code NOTILL, all caps, one word, for 10% off your first order. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Rob Hazel, who writes, quote, "Hi, Farmer Jesse. As I am cleaning up beds this week and thinking ahead to clearing and prepping more beds in early spring, I am thinking about ways to lean up the process. I was watching one of your older videos in which you mentioned and showed the Landsea Compost peat spreader. I haven't been able to find any follow-up discussions on its pros and cons. Is that tool worthwhile in terms of time and labor saving in the application of compost and or peat moss? Also, my beds are 42 inches wide, so I think I would consider the 36-inch spreader, so I could pretty much cover a bed in one pass. I believe you're using the 24-inch model. Do you think the 36-inch model would be too heavy to push by hand? I'm also wondering if this tool gets clogged up easily, if compost is very moist. Finally, can the tool also double as a bed roller for improving soil/seed to soil contact? Thanks," end quote. Okay, so great nudge here, Rob. And to any other Patreon people, if there is something I've mentioned and haven't revisited, please let me know in one of the show threads over there. I can't always keep track of all of it, so that's not only a service to me, but I'm happy to go back and update old experiments. So what Rob is talking about here is that many years ago now, I found this company on Instagram called Landsea. That is a lawn care company. They make a few different things like handheld edgers and levelers and aerating tools, lawn care stuff. But what caught my attention was these compost and peat moss spreaders. They make that, if you're not watching on YouTube, look like a barrel of mesh screen that you fill up and pull or push. And they basically just deposit the material as it rolls. They're very lightweight, and honestly, my 2-year-old at the time was the tool's biggest fan because it was so easy to push it around. Basically, you fill the mesh barrel with peat moss or fine compost, and as you pull it, the peat moss evenly tumbles out. In lawn care, this is used for fertilization and or for covering grass seeds with peat moss to improve germination. So several years ago, I called the owner and was like, hey, will you send me one of these things so I can see if there's a market in the market gardening world for something like that? And he was like, yeah, sure. And to be clear, I don't do that very often, and certainly not as much as I used to, because I guess it's easier for me to tell now from a distance if something will or won't work. But also, I don't like asking small business owners for free stuff or the inherent expectation that comes with that. Sometimes I just don't have the time to give new stuff a try, so mostly I turn down offers or only ask for what I think I will use for sure. This dude was cool, though, and sent me one of these rollers, the 24-inch one, like you said, and I've tried it in a bunch of different ways, but I never really found anything that made a ton of sense for market gardens because the layer of peat or compost it lays down is far too thin to be much of a mulch. So that's kind of out of the picture. Plus, you have to refill it pretty frequently. So that makes it not super efficient. Then if the compost is too sifted, it will dump out really quickly. But if it's not sifted enough, it won't dump out at all. And like you said, if it's wet, it just clogs it. So you really have to have the exact right material. Peat moss works, and I could see that being helpful for a no-till cover crop or for adding moisture protecting layer to carrots or something, but I don't really use the peat like that and just never really found a great combo and application for the spreader. Not saying there isn't some opportunity out there, just that it's not clear how much that particular tool would help. There are some small scale compost spreaders and stuff like that on the market, like the newer one for the BCS walk-behind tractor that I got to play with a little in Louisiana a few years back. But you could probably dial that thing in pretty well to put down the exact layer you were looking for, and it has a bigger hopper. I don't know if you call it a hopper on a compost spreader, but a bigger container for the compost, meaning it would last longer. But obviously nowhere near as cheap, significantly more, like 10 or 12 times more expensive or something. So I just found with the Landsea, I would get half the bed and then have to come back and refill it. To your question about bed rolling, now that is possible. It could double as a bed roller while laying down a really light layer of something like compost or peat. It's not super heavy, but it could compact a little bit. I don't see any reason why not. Shouts to them, though, to Landsea for letting me play with one. So I hope that's helpful, Rob. Otherwise, let's take a quick break and then go through some of the comments and questions on soil blocks from the week as promised. Be right back. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Harnwah Greenhouses. Harnwah Greenhouses has pioneered controlled environment agriculture since 1965, partnering with market gardeners and farmers across North America to deliver turnkey greenhouse solutions. Their unwavering mission is to support growers' success through innovation and expertise in design, manufacturing, and installation. Harnwah Greenhouses are engineered to withstand high wind and snow loads, providing optimal brightness, increased yields, rapid ROI, and long-lasting durability. With over 20,000 projects completed, they are more than a manufacturer. They are a trusted partner. Their structures foster sustainable, energy-efficient ecosystems that drive profitable, resilient agriculture. In 2025, Harnwah is introducing a new low-tech, high-tunnel model starting at just $2 per square foot, offering open field growers an accessible entry into controlled environment agriculture. Harnwah Greenhouses, leading the way in turnkey solutions for local growers. Learn more at harnwah.com. That's HARNOIS.com. All right, back to the show. All right, so I said I would answer all the soil blocking questions I could on Friday, so that's what I'll do. I also thought some of the comments were good for perspective, so I'll sprinkle a few of those in here as well, like this from @UncleLooney, who wrote, quote, I bought my 2-inch soil blocker circa late 1970s from Johnny's with Elliot Coleman's instructions. Have the 1.5 inch for 10 years and use Jesse's soil ball idea, follow the instructions and observe the results. It ain't that hard. Even the less than perfect blocks are better than the wind strips. Too dry and too wet crumbles or muck. And yes, the plants need less hardening off in my experience of around 45 years. Blocks are better. The indigenous folks in Central America proved that centuries ago. End quote. Yeah, I will definitely do a deep dive at some point into the Chinampas. Because, I mean, soil blocking isn't a recent invention by any stretch of the imagination. So good comments there. Okay, so to the questions, @Sharon Brown asks, quote, hi, my question about using soil blocks has to do with using the mesh trays in addition to flat trays. I've seen others just using the flats with gentle bottom watering. Seems to work well, but I'm thinking maybe the mesh trays are required to get the air pruning of the bottom roots. I think I remember someone saying the bottom roots get all tangled up if they just sit on the flat trays, end quote. Okay, so although you could technically get away with just using the flat trays without holes, you do risk a lot of risk, honestly, of creating anaerobic pockets. It's pretty high, and moreover, like you suggest, the air pruning may not be as effective. Not saying it can't work, it just reduces your flexibility. And yeah, and you do want that air pruning effect all the way around the block. Then @MattUD2ZN asked, quote, has anyone tried the drop seeders from Bootstrap, which are spaced for soil blocks? Johnny's is also selling a 72-hole Cedar, they say, is space for soil blocks now, end quote. So I have not. Looking at them, they look like they could work. I like the idea of the bootstrap one for the 35 block standing blocker. These are both tools I could try at some point. I have the equipment. I wasn't honestly even aware that they had the droppers, so that's cool. Thank you. You all are keeping me informed. Then at Alex Powell 9 asked, quote, I use the 35 stand-up blocker for smaller crops. Do you really think it's much more soil in the soil block versus, say, a 128 cell tray? End quote. So great question. And if you used wet soil mix to fill the cells and then made your soil blocks, depending on the cells you were using, it's double the weight in most cases. Because the cells tend to taper off in a cell tray, like an upside-down pyramid, the blocks will be more volume generally. They also asked, do your trays have ridges or holes in them? Our trays have mesh on the bottom and ridges on the sides. However, I have also used the paper pot trays with a standing blocker plus the 5-block hand blocker, and I can usually fit 155 in those trays. It doesn't work quite the same with the Swift blocker really, which is built for those classic 1020 soil blocking trays from Johnny's. And lastly, Alex asked, how long do your tomatoes and peppers last once you ball them up? Okay, so if you want to avoid getting the big 4-inch blocker, you can make soil balls by hand. I've talked about this many times. It's work, but after you get good at it, it's no more work than the big blocker. To answer your question though, Alex, we usually wait until the tomatoes and peppers are starting to get crowded in the tray before we put them into the balls. But it doesn't really matter when we do that. Usually at like 4 or 5, 6 inches tall or something. And then usually kind of just when they're getting crowded in the trays. And then those will last about 3 weeks before you probably need to start adding some amendments of some sort or adding even another layer of soil mix around them. And then you definitely have to frequently water them and turn them around so you don't just keep one side facing away from the water as they grow, just to keep them moist all the way through. I think people underwater soil blocks more often than not, and that's part of the big reason they fail. Anyway, I will happily answer more soil block questions as we go. Right now, it's Friday, so I'm going to wrap it up there and get my face paint ready for the UK game on Saturday and then add some stripes for the Brighton game on Sunday. I hope everyone has a great weekend. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and to the team at No-Till Growers for their support and to Epidemic Sound for the background tunes. Appreciate those. Also, I have a quick request for you. It would be rad if you have friends in Germany, Italy, or France to let them know that my book, The Living Soil Handbook, is either currently available in their language or will be soon. I think the Italian version comes out this month and the German version comes out at the beginning of February. It came out in French last year. You cannot get those translated copies from No-Till Growers, but you can get them in the countries that speak those respective languages. It would be awesome if you would do that. Thank you. All right. Big thank you to everyone at patreon.com/no-till-growers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or if you sign up in the month of January, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to, oh good, we got our weeklies. Alex and Oliver, Maina, Stacy Moorman, Bill King, Byron Green, Chris Yates, Stephen Smith, Mortimer, and Connolly Farm and Garden. So this is the story. Let's say we're in Nebraska. This is a small farming community there, and it is a comedic adventure about a community of farmers who are constantly trying to help each other out. And this new farm moves in. Let's call it Connolly Farm and Garden, and their neighbors are constantly helping out. Like they'll walk outside and their lawn will be mysteriously mowed, and they have to try and figure out like what's going on, especially when they go to the local diner and nobody talks to them. But it's great. It's kind of got like a grumpier old men meets mean girls vibe. So all the thumbs up. Anyway, everyone have a great weekend. We will see you on Monday. Bye.